Story 1, the parking feud that finally got a solid solution, hopefully a good one for you. Sorry for any mistakes as English is not my first language. A few details are changed for anonymity. I work at a niche retail store located in the heart of town. Our customers are dedicated and often travel from afar just to visit us, so having a clear and accessible parking lot is crucial for our business. Unfortunately, our next-door neighbors, a family-run landscaping and garden supply store, have been a thorn in our side for years when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner goes back over a decade before I joined, all over something trivial. I know the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot, which was unsightly for their customers. It was the pettiest neighbor drama you could imagine, but it festered for years. The final straw came after the Rona, when the physical business in town started picking back up and our parking lot started overflowing with cars again, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. See, our two parking lots are connected. Ours is about twice the size of his, but the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, those vans are rarely even there during business hours. As a result, his customers just parked in our lot, leaving us with few spaces for our own customers. My boss, trying to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Maybe they could adjust their parking setup to free up a few more spaces for customers, and that their vans were welcome to park in our lot, if their lot was ever full, but the landscaper shot down the idea immediately, insisting that it was absolutely crucial to reserve all of those spaces for his vans, even though they were rarely there during the day. The conversation turned heated, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper, practically daring him, shot back, "Go ahead." Probably knowing how expensive that would be. As you can imagine, it ended with both men storming off and not speaking for 2 years. Typical neighbor stuff. Fast forward to recently, and we got a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to fine vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window, if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, we'd get most of the revenue and they would keep any fines issued. It was perfect, especially since we were losing spaces to freeloaders, wouldn't really impact the customers of the nearby stores. And if anyone had a good reason to park there for longer, then we could give them an extension at our discretion. However, for the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Being the considerate neighbor, again, my boss had the parking company rep reach out to the landscaper to explain the deal and benefits. But true to form, the landscaper didn't even let the rep finish before kicking him out, making it very clear that, under no circumstances, would his lot become a paid parking zone. Instead of going through the hassle of putting up the necessary expensive fence, my boss had a better idea: big rocks. One of his construction buddies had a stash of leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost, to be repaid through future parking revenue. On Monday morning, before opening hours, one of the buddy's employees, a big, burly guy with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. The rocks were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper stormed out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for his own safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down and retreat in frustration. The rocks weren't just a physical barrier. They quickly became a mental obstacle for the landscapers' employees. Their muscle memory kept bringing them into our lot, only for them to realize too late that they couldn't drive through anymore. We watched from our newly installed surveillance cameras, just in case the neighbor tried anything, trying not to burst out laughing as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their own entrance, only to perform a series of painful maneuvers to squeeze into their now much smaller parking area. At one point, we even caught one of their rushing vans clipping a rock while trying to maneuver. A little bonus for our viewing pleasure: the next day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, the landscaper's family members were prowling around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were on a mission to find a violation. But the parking company was very professional, and had done everything by the book, so there was nothing for them to report. In the meantime, my boss was positively glowing with satisfaction as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part: we noticed that the neighbor's family had started parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite to mess with us. One day, my coworker saw one of the family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. We thought it was odd at the time but didn't think much of it until the following week, when the landscaper's son came into our store looking a bit embarrassed. Apparently, he had accidentally overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, insisting it was just a simple mistake. My boss politely responded, "Oh, I'd really love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company handles all the fines." The look on his face was priceless. He left, shoulders slumped, retreating back to their store. Ever since, our lot has been blissfully clear, and our customers have had no trouble finding spaces. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling as they have a harder time maneuvering their vans, still trying to pretend they're not bothered. As for my boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. TLDR, neighboring landscaping store took up parking, refused to cooperate. We followed their instructions and blocked off our lot and set up parking enforcement cameras. Within a week, they got fined, and came begging us to waive it. Boss simply told them it's out of our hands. Now, our lot is clear, and we're happier than ever. Story 2, Dress Code. This didn't happen directly to me, but a person I used to work with a couple of years back. We worked as system consultants and would travel to the sites we were assisting during the phases of the projects that required being there in person, as travel costs for these trips would directly impact the budget of the project or were passed on to the client. We were encouraged to travel as lightly and plan as much ahead as possible, choosing the lowest fare within reason and not go overboard with the hotel and meals. Most of the time this worked well enough. If something was out of the ordinary, usually a quick call to whomever to explain the reason behind it would clear things up, our expenses would be approved and we'd carry on, until the company was hired by this one customer. People there seemed to operate out of some parallel world, or the constraints of the real world would not apply. Anyway, the usual policy of being cost-conscious also applied there, and the controller from the customer made a point to let us know that they would not approve expenses our company or my colleague, who was a directly hired contractor, submitted. If we weren't mindful of costs, it inevitably happened that we flew in for our first in-person meeting and, booking the lowest available fare within a reasonable schedule, meant we flew without checked luggage and showed up in button-down shirts, dark chinos and black slip-on shoes, not the most formal attire, but certainly not in pajamas, and perfectly acceptable for every other client up to then. Well, not for these people. We were taken aside and told that their C-suite management was very taken aback that their provider couldn't even manage to show up in suits, proper shoes and an ironed shirt. I was stumped, but my contractor colleague retained his cool and simply asked for a quick 2-sentence email with the requirement for suits, ironed shirts, and formal shoes. The client surprisingly obliged. Cue our next trip, and when coordinating with my colleague to book similar flight times and the same hotel, things got interesting. First, we were flying in the evening before. Second, we were checking lug. Third, the No Frills Hotel a little further out of town, but close enough to the client's office, wouldn't do this time. Since they wanted formal attire without any creases, we'd have to check in trolley, because 2 suits and a fresh shirt for each day, plus a spare, weren't going to fit in our carry-on. And since we'd have to iron any creases out, we have to book a hotel that has ironing facilities, so the business hotel downtown it has to be this time. And the time spent ironing will be invoiced, or at least my contractor colleague will. I'll skip over the uneventful meeting and go straight to when my company's invoice and the contractor's expenses claim got rejected. since we had the email requesting formal wear. We argued that this was done at the client's request. The controller wouldn't budge. So the contractor immediately stopped working for the client and told my management as much, recommending I do the same. After missing a deadline and a couple of remote meetings, all with a short but sweet answer that there was an outstanding payment, the controller relented, the C-suite dropped the dress code, and we dropped the client the moment the contract was done. I have since been contacted by them again through LinkedIn in an attempt to recruit me. LOL. Story 3, is the cable live? Then let me finish it myself. This one is from my early days when I was working as a technician for an internet provider company, but it still brings a smile to my face when I remember it. And recently had a technician coming to install my internet and it all came back. I was working mostly residential buildings and my job that time was pretty simple: come to the basement, find our distribution box, patch the cable to the right endpoint for the requesting flat, go to the flat, fix cable outlet when needed, verify cable is live, there is signal coming through and it is the right signal. This is somewhat important. Connect modem, verify all good, tell the happy customer the internet is ready to use, and off I go. One day I am doing my job again but got this know-it-all guy. Had to call him to let me in the building and it was a blast right from the start. First he told me he knew exactly where my company distribution box is, only to lead me to the electricity provider box. Then he is absolutely sure his flat is number XX while the papers state YY, and indeed was YY. There were a few more helps from his side which I skipped to avoid this becoming a book. But eventually we are up in the flat and I am going to check the signal, but the guy is like, come on, hurry up, need my connection, need to work on super important stuff. I tell him I need to test the signal first, but here he opens up my malicious compliance window. He says, you do not need to do that, just connect the cable, if the cable is live, just go and I will finish it myself. I still give him a chance by explicitly stressing that test will take some minutes only, but if it does not work, I will not be able to come earlier than in a couple of days. No, absolutely not, he can finish it by himself. Okay, my man, you've got it. Already too long story. To make it short, cable was live, but the signal was from local TV antennae, not from our cable internet. This was actually relatively common issue at that time, older residential buildings, reused wiring. Cable patching to a wrong one, and was not so hard to fix once you knew what's wrong. I only imagine what the guy tried to make it work before calling our call center to schedule my visit again. What I know is I came to the flat 3 days later only to be greeted by his lovely wife, which made me some tea and thanked me for being kind and fixing the problem. To come to a closure, when a technician came to install my internet a few days ago, I made him some tea and told him to take his time and do all that's needed. We had a little chat and guess what? The process and issues are still the same, and recently he was telling his junior colleague why checking if cable is live is not enough. Story 4. Who says we need that anti-slip surface on the outdoor pavement? Everyone below you, that's who. Edit for TL/Doctor. Story takes place in the latter half of 2022 in the UK. Names and company changed/not mentioned due to NDA and overzealousness on behalf of company. Part 1. The issue begins. I worked at a major tourist attraction during this time, and we got thousands of customers every day. Part of our attraction was outside, and we had expanded part of the outside to accommodate new parts for the attraction. In order to blend with the theme of the new section, a brand new brick pavement was installed in the area. Upper management had at the time a tendency to not think things 100% through, and this was no different. The big thing was that it was decided not to install an anti-slip surface on the brick pavement. Now we were in the middle of summer, and it was a particularly dry summer, but nonetheless when it isn't dry we got a lot of rain and a lot of snow and frost. We need that anti-slip surface. We told upper management this, and as per usual, fell on deaf ears. Winter comes far too soon, and with it all the rain that was meant for summer and to make up for a dry autumn. And the winter of 2022 was bad for the UK. Temperatures fell to single digits, and then negative in the Celsius. With the cold came a permanent frost over the brick pavement, and the beginning of malicious compliance. Part 2, the compliance. The first slips and falls heralded us to the idea. At the time the company required us to write in paper accident and incident reports about everything if something bad happened. Now anyone who's worked in tourist attractions, we've all seen kids fall from being too excited, and we often do a polite to see if blood/gore/missing limbs are present, and if all is good we just ignore it. No one likes paperwork. Not to mention, due to upper management's distaste for us, we had to take the long way to the offices where the paper was to fill it in, and get someone to cover us while we filled it in. Upper management hated us being in their special offices and not out with the paying customers. It is worth mentioning in their defense, our lower managers and middle managers were on our side, because even they knew what upper management was doing was utter nonsense. So they saw what we were doing and agreed with it. What happened was every single slip that occurred outside on the impromptu ice rink that was the brick pavement we would report. That's about 15 to 20 minutes of us, in the warmth, not freezing our butts off, writing about how someone had slipped in the exact same manner as the last 10 people, all in plain view of upper management. I like to believe they began working from home more due to us being there in their office. I learned from one of our lower managers that is a dear friend that the stack of reports handed to upper management was measurable in inches. I do not regret saying I was one of the top 3 contributors to that pile. Part 3, the bare minimum response. Upper management finally began to make efforts to fix the situation. They decided to just cordon off the vast majority of the brick pavement with temporary, ugly barriers, and put down anti-slip mats to make a path for the parts of the attraction that they wanted visitors to walk in. They thought they had won. We knew better. Anyone who has worked with tourists knows that tourists are a special breed of stupid. Told not to touch the very important items, they will touch. Told to keep their kids near and not let them wander off. I think the record for no lost kids was 4 hours. And so these barriers that everyone is required to respect? Well, clearly it doesn't apply to me. Each time we told people not to go underneath these barriers, they looked like deer caught in the headlights. And the barriers were just low enough that kids would duck under and run straight onto the ice and onto their butts. Even more accident and incident reports rocked up as a result, and all upper management would do is tell us low, barely above minimum wage earners to do a better job policing this part of the attraction. Part 4, wake-up call, school kids. Oh, how we loathed schools, mostly teenager ones. Little kids no more than 5 to 10. Oh, they were delightful, we were happy with them. The main reason was because the teachers, who are still responsible for the kids no matter what, actually followed our guidelines. So naturally we liked the little ones. And were genuinely more concerned for them than normal. We all then had our moment of fear when it was reported that a 7-year-old boy had slipped and fallen on the ice, no doubt having been playing with classmates and unintentionally not seeing where he was going. That didn't save his 2 front teeth chipping and a call for our on-site first aid team to come and help with the blood. Luckily he seemed alright, beside the fact the tooth fairy was going to be paying double that night. But for us, lower and middle management, it was the final straw. I wish I had taken a photo of that accident and incident report for posterity, the number of people co-signing it. Part 5, the fallout. Nobody wants a lawsuit, and that kid's parents had grounds to do so like nobody's business. The fact a child had been injured from negligence did not look good on upper management's part, and it wasn't as if they could pretend nothing had happened. Everyone had been telling them about the risk, and when it got to the big wigs, I can only imagine what was said. Miraculously, and within 2 days of the kids' teeth, they put an anti-slip surface on the brick pavement, at what was probably more of a cost than had they just done so in the summer. The barriers were removed, and the number of paper accident and incident reports dramatically decreased. They finally also got around to installing tablet devices with which we could fill in reports without needing to drop position. Our lives were made easier. They got an earful, and that kid probably has a fun story for when he's older and has kids himself. I'd like to say upper management learned their lesson and took our words on board for future endeavors, but that is like expecting the dog to not poop on the carpet after the first time you shove their nose into it. I no longer work there for other reasons, and many of the people who joined in the act of malicious compliance have since gone elsewhere. But for nearly 3 glorious months, you had never seen a department work together like ours in that way before or since. TL.DR. Management refused to properly prepare a pavement for winter, and didn't like us telling them to do so. Winter and 3 months of regular accident and incident reports in front of them, plus a kid losing his 2 front teeth later, and miraculously they found the money to treat the pavement. Story 5, I can't give students a 0 for using AI, unless I have proof. No problem, I'm a high school English teacher. I have 2 major annoyances when it comes to kids doing work. First, a lot of kids don't read or listen to directions. Assignment instructions are written on their papers. And I read them out loud, but I still have students asking me, what are we doing? That's no big deal, though. It's a pretty normal thing to deal with as a teacher. The real issue bugging me is students cheating on writing assignments using ChatGPT. I'm pretty good at spotting AI-generated essays. But the problem is that when I try to accuse students of using AI, they deny it. They act outraged that I would accuse them even though we both know they're playing dumb. I usually just give them a 0 and move on with my life, but there's always the fear that one of them might take the issue to administration. If they did, I'm not confident that admin would back me up. It's hard to prove something is AI generated. And these days, the higher-ups are more likely to side with the student, so I hatched a plan. I gave an open-ended creative writing assignment. The directions said to write a story about anything you want and then answer some questions about the story you wrote. The thing is, when you ask ChatGPT, tell me a story, it always spits out the exact same story, about a girl named Alara who lives in the woods. Once upon a time, in a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, there lived a young woman named Alara. She was known throughout the village for her curiosity and sense of adventure, always eager to explore the world beyond the familiar paths of her home. So, in slightly smaller print under the instructions, I wrote, if your main character's name is Alara, -99 points. Lo and behold, I got 1 or 2 kids turn in a story about a girl named Alara who lives in woods. When I turned back the papers with a grade of 1 out of 100, because I find that it stings more than a 0, the kids predictably asked why. And all I had to do was point to the instructions that they didn't read. There was no need to mention AI. We both knew what they did. Edit, for people saying they tried ChatGPT and got a different story/name. I don't know why it's inconsistent. All I know is that I get the same story every time, and so do my students. The paragraph I put in the post was copied from ChatGPT directly. I discovered all this when a student submitted that same story earlier in the year for a different creative writing assignment.